They sway gently in the corner of your living room. They sparkle in decorative pots near your window. They were gifted at housewarmings, purchased on impulse, or chosen simply because they looked fresh. But here's a truth rarely spoken. Not all plants bring harmony. Not all leaves are green blessings. Some, despite their beauty, quietly disturb the energy of your space, like guests that smile, but never truly leave in peace. In Feng Shui, everything visible is also vibrational. That ivy climbing the wall may look artistic, but its energy might be slowly strangling your momentum. That cactus by your entryway may seem bold, but it could be prickling your relationships. This isn't superstition. It's spatial psychology, the ancient Chinese art of aligning what grows around you with what grows within you. You see, not all growth is welcome. A weed grows, a tumor grows, clutter spreads. Just because something is alive doesn't mean it's supportive. And when that life force takes root in your most sacred spaces, your home, your desk, your altar, it shapes more than your aesthetic. It shapes your mood, your decisions, even your luck. In today's video, we explore a side of plants most people never consider, the disruptive side. The well-intentioned snake plants, bonsai trees, or aggressive vines that, in the wrong place or wrong energy context, stop flow instead of supporting it. Plants that may be visually pleasing, but energetically draining. Plants that might be quietly locking doors you've been working so hard to open. Let me be clear. This is not about labeling certain plants as universally bad. Feng Shui doesn't deal in absolutes. It deals in alignment, in relationships, in flow. A cactus on a sunlit balcony in Arizona? Brilliant. That same cactus next to your bed where energy should be soft, yin, and supportive? That's a different story. So if you've ever felt like your home was beautiful but strangely stagnant, if you've cleaned, decluttered, and decorated but still can't shake the sense of heaviness, stay with me, because sometimes the energy culprit isn't loud. It doesn't creak or flash or announce itself. Sometimes it's just sitting quietly in a pot near your door. This episode will walk you through 3 common household plants that may be subtly working against you. I'll explain why they disrupt Feng Shui flow, where they tend to cause the most trouble, and what to consider if you love them too much to let them go. We'll talk about the symbolism of spiky leaves and the hidden meanings behind certain vine behaviors. We'll discuss how containers, corners, and context can completely change the energetic footprint of a plant. And as always, I'll give you balanced solutions, not fear-based avoidance, but awareness-based adjustment. Before we dive into the 3 most common disharmonious plants, I want to invite you to do something that will help this space grow just like we help your space thrive. If this kind of content, grounded, reflective, and rooted in real Feng Shui wisdom, resonates with you, I'd love for you to give this video a like, share it with someone who's also building an intentional home, and subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We're inching toward our first 2,000 followers, and with your help, we'll continue growing this community, leaf by leaf, breath by breath. Because ultimately, this channel isn't just about what you place in your home. It's about what you allow into your field, into your energy, into your future. So let's begin. The first plant might already be in your living room, and it might be the reason you keep saying, "I feel stuck," without knowing why. Are you ready to clear that path? Feng Shui principle. Plants as energy conductors. In traditional Feng Shui, plants are never treated as mere decorative afterthoughts. They are recognized as living extensions of elemental energy, vessels of qi that carry profound influence over the atmosphere, vitality, and functionality of a space. Every plant, through its structure, color, and growth pattern, conducts energy in a particular way. It either supports the current of prosperity or creates interference within it. A healthy, upright plant with strong stems and open leaves doesn't just signal physical well-being. It radiates yang energy, growth, momentum, clarity. It encourages uplift. It stabilizes vision. And it harmonizes with human energy fields in a way that softens tension and invites cohesion. But when a plant becomes mismatched with its environment, when it trails wildly in all directions, leans awkwardly, or droops in corners where stagnation is already high, it becomes more than an eyesore. It turns into an energetic disruption. These forms of botanical chaos have a language of their own. Tangled vines signal emotional confusion. Dried tips reflect neglected aspects of one's health or finances. And overgrown foliage in compact areas can suffocate qi, much like too many competing voices in a small room. Energy that should be moving through your home like a calm stream begins to back up, swirl, or disperse altogether. This is why placement and plant type are not trivial details in Feng Shui. They are crucial contributors to a home's energetic blueprint. For example, placing a large, spiky plant in a bedroom, a space that should be calm, receptive, and yin-oriented, can activate too much sharp fire energy. It may lead to restlessness, arguments between partners, or disrupted sleep patterns. Similarly, trailing vines over a dining area may visually pull energy downward, symbolizing a leak in nourishment or prosperity. Even cluttered clusters of too many plants with no clear boundary can create an overwhelming field, much like an office filled with files but no structure. The result? Constant busyness, but little focus or result. A principle often forgotten is that the shape of energy follows the shape of form. A well-pruned plant becomes a well-directed energy signal. A disorganized or dying plant becomes a broken antenna that confuses the message between your inner intention and your surrounding space. The location, height, container, and neighboring elements all matter. A beautifully healthy plant placed directly in front of a mirror may double the energy, but if that energy is chaotic, so is the mirror's reflection. On the other hand, one small pothos positioned thoughtfully near the southeast corner could support the prosperity field of the home simply through its color, flow, and intention. This is also where intention meets interaction. A plant is not just energy in its own right. It absorbs, reflects, and translates the energy of the person who tends it. A plant regularly touched with care, watered with mindfulness, and observed with appreciation will behave differently than one bought, placed, and forgotten. You may not realize it, but your home is always speaking with you, through your walls, through your light, and yes, through your plants. The ones you choose and how they thrive or struggle under your care mirror your relationship with self-maintenance, prosperity, and emotional clarity. Ultimately, in Feng Shui, a plant is not just greenery, it is a conductor. And just like a conductor in an orchestra, its effect is determined not only by its presence, but by how attuned it is to the entire arrangement. When well integrated, plants act like spiritual acupuncture points within a home, gentle yet precise tools to recalibrate flow and restore equilibrium. So before you bring another plant home or shift one across the room, consider, what is this plant saying? What energy is it channeling? And is it supporting the life you want to build or quietly pulling you away from it? Problematic plant number 1, golden trumpet, alamanda. In the world of Feng Shui, beauty alone is never the measure of energetic alignment. A space that looks vibrant on the surface can still feel off, heavy, restless, or subtly chaotic if the underlying energetic components are in conflict. And among the most misleading of these components is the golden trumpet plant, also known as alamanda. With its luminous yellow flowers and glossy green leaves, this plant appears to embody optimism and light. But beneath its cheerful exterior lies a fire-heavy signature that, if misunderstood or misplaced, can become a silent saboteur to peace, relationships, and personal stability. The first mistake many homeowners make with alamanda is assuming that all bright yellow flowering plants automatically boost prosperity. Yellow is, after all, the color of earth in the 5-element theory, a grounding hue associated with nourishment, stability, and harmonious wealth. But this assumption overlooks the complexity of elemental balance. Yellow, when expressed too sharply or paired with excessive fire elements, loses its centering quality. In the case of golden trumpet, the tone is not soft or buttery, it's electric. It stings the visual field like a flashbulb in a dark room. Its blooms are trumpet-shaped, loud, forward, attention-seeking, and its leaves are aggressively shiny, pushing reflective light back into the space without absorbing or harmonizing it. In Feng Shui, we don't simply analyze colors. We analyze form, texture, growth pattern, and placement. Alamanda's fire signature is not subtle. It doesn't rise upward with discipline like bamboo. It sprawls sideways, tumbling over fences, crawling across trellises, and sometimes invading nearby plants. Its energy is not stable. It is flirtatious, impulsive, dramatic. That's why when placed in areas associated with rest, healing, or decision-making, like bedrooms, meditation corners, or near front entrances, it introduces a jittery undercurrent that's hard to identify until it's already shifted the mood of the entire space. Emotionally, the symbolism of this plant maps to themes of emotional volatility, attention craving, and performance-driven identity. In relationships, it mirrors the dynamics of dependency, the need to be noticed, the fear of being irrelevant, the habit of overextending for approval. If you notice that arguments in your home tend to spark in cycles, or that feelings of anxiety or hypersensitivity surface more easily than usual, and you've introduced Alamanda into your environment recently, it may not be a coincidence. Feng Shui teaches that environments speak not just through major objects, but through minor, repeated visual cues. Every time your eyes land on that vibrant, trumpet-shaped flower, the message isn't, "You are calm and secure." It's, "Look at me, react to me, match my drama." Consider how the plant behaves even in the wild. Invasive, fast-growing, difficult to prune. Its physical behavior mimics its metaphysical footprint. Unchecked, it takes over gardens and fences with a kind of beautiful chaos. In this way, it energetically represents overstimulation, the kind that doesn't allow thoughts to settle, moods to stabilize, or relationships to breathe. For households with young children, pets, or elderly members, this overstimulation can translate into disrupted sleep, shortened tempers, and an environment that feels more like a stage than a sanctuary. Now let's place this plant within the framework of room-by-room feng shui. If Alamanda is positioned in the family zone, the east sector of the home, it may subtly trigger competitiveness, miscommunication, or confusion about roles. In the bedroom, particularly in the southwest, the love and relationship sector, it may stir emotional drama, passionate one moment, distant the next, mirroring its own life cycle of blooming and dying in quick succession. And in the entryway, especially in southeast zones associated with wealth, it can generate false optimism. Projects that start with flair but lack staying power, or money that comes quickly and goes just as fast. You might wonder, but I love the brightness it brings. Isn't there a way to keep it? In rare cases, outdoor gardens far from windows or social zones, it may be appropriate if balanced with heavy earth elements. Stones, square planters, clay pots, and shade-loving yin plants like peace lilies or snake plants. However, the general feng shui guidance is clear. Alamanda belongs outside, away from the energetic heart of the home. Even in gardens, it should be planted in boundary zones where its restlessness can symbolize a threshold, not a core value. For those who are drawn to its vibrant hue and want to preserve the uplifting effect without the side effects, alternatives exist. Consider yellow chrysanthemums, which are earth-aligned and carry an energy of gentle joy and resilience. Their rounded shape echoes the form of ancient coins and symbolizes wholeness. They don't sprawl or invade. They sit, they glow, they endure. Or explore yellow orchids, symbols of elegance, wisdom, and success with restraint. Their visual minimalism and vertical orientation suggest mindfulness rather than mania. These plants still attract positive attention, but they don't demand it. They uplift rather than provoke. This concept is especially important in modern homes where overstimulation is already common. Between LED lights, screens, background noise, and visual clutter, many of us live in spaces that are high on yang and low on stability. Introducing a plant like Alamanda into this mix may push the energy over the edge, making calm reflection, sound sleep, or productive focus unnecessarily difficult. To conclude, the golden trumpet is a plant of paradox. It symbolizes joy, but carries a signature of anxiety. It dazzles, but rarely soothes. It wants to be seen, but not necessarily integrated. In the language of feng shui, these are red flags. A balanced home should not require constant adjustment to accommodate one object. Objects should support the flow, not demand a starring role in the energy narrative. If you already own an Alamanda and sense its presence is disruptive, Consider relocating it outdoors, repotting it with grounding elements, or replacing it altogether with a floral species that calms rather than commands. In the next segment, we'll explore another misunderstood guest in the Feng Shui world, the cactus, spiky, stylish, but often energetically sharp in all the wrong ways. Problematic plant number 2, climbing vines indoors. At first glance, there's something undeniably romantic about indoor vines. Their soft tendrils curl along windowsills, climb elegantly up walls, and drape gently from hanging pots, like green threads stitching together the corners of a home. They evoke an image of calm, of nature invited in, of rustic charm and lush vitality. But in the principles of classical Feng Shui, what looks charming is not always energetically harmonious. When climbing vines such as English ivy, morning glory, pothos that are allowed to sprawl chaotically, or other trailing species take over a space, the visual poetry quickly turns into an energetic problem. Unlike upright, disciplined growth that channels qi upward with clarity, these plants wrap, grip, and cling. And that behavior speaks volumes, not just in symbolism, but in the emotional and financial patterns that emerge in the homes they occupy. In the language of spatial energetics, vines are considered binding plants. Their primary energetic signature is not to move energy, it is to tether it. Vines in the wild attach themselves to stronger structures to survive. They don't stand independently. They borrow form. They rely on friction. Translated into the metaphysical field of a home, this gripping behavior becomes a subtle metaphor for entanglement. Relationships that rely too much on each other, households that feel like they're stuck in old emotional patterns, and lives that seem to wind in loops rather than progress in lines. When climbing vines are placed indoors, especially in confined or stagnant areas like small bedrooms, hallways, or cluttered workspaces, they tend to act like energetic cobwebs. Instead of encouraging flow, they trap it. Qi becomes sluggish. Conversations become repetitive. Emotions linger longer than they should. You may find that after spending time in a room with sprawling ivy or unchecked vine growth, your mind feels foggy, tasks feel more tedious. Miscommunication rises. There may be tension between family members or a general sense of inertia, like you're pushing through invisible resistance, even in your own home. Nowhere is this more pronounced than when vines occupy transitional areas of the house, doorways, corridors, near stairwells, or above passageways. These are spaces that are supposed to guide movement, not obstruct it. When vines creep around these zones, they symbolically tie knots in your ability to transition, whether that means career advancement, relationship growth, or even just mental clarity between one activity and the next. In extreme cases, people report chronic fatigue, frequent misunderstandings, and a sense that they can't get out from under certain mental or financial burdens. That's not coincidence. That's suffocated energy, qi that wants to circulate but finds itself gripped by greenery that doesn't know when to stop growing. This doesn't mean vines are universally bad. Outdoors, they serve as natural covers, privacy screens, or climbing companions to trellises and arbors. They soften exteriors and give visual continuity to garden walls. In Feng Shui, context is everything. What serves one setting well may disrupt another completely. The issue with indoor vines is their tendency to override boundaries. Their energetic language doesn't say, "Here I grow with respect to the space." It says, "Let me in, let me over, let me through." And for already sensitive environments, bedrooms where people rest, studies where decisions are made, or meditation corners meant for stillness, that relentless overgrowth becomes noise, both visually and energetically. Consider the symbolism. Vines don't just grow, they sprawl. And in metaphysical terms, sprawling energy equals scattered focus. A vine doesn't move in a straight line. It winds, it doubles back, it seeks support constantly. That same quality, if mirrored by the humans living around it, translates to indecision, dependency, circular thought patterns, and delay. This is particularly harmful in homes where someone is trying to heal from emotional trauma, focus on creative work, or launch something new financially. Vines will pull that momentum back into loops, not forward into breakthroughs. Now let's go a step deeper. Ivy in particular has long been associated with protection in European folklore, but that protection is binding. It keeps things in as much as it keeps things out. Feng Shui takes a more dynamic view. It asks, are you choosing stillness or are you being held still? Are you protected or are you restricted? That's the central energetic tension with indoor vines. They often feel like comfort, but act like limitation. Their energy is passive-aggressive, inviting on the surface, but controlling underneath. There are also physical symptoms that can emerge when vines overtake interior spaces. Headaches, short temper, restless sleep, and even mild skin irritations have been linked to indoor plant overload, especially in poorly ventilated rooms. Many trailing vines release volatile organic compounds, VOCs, that can accumulate over time when airflow is limited. Combine that with the psychological weight of dense, downward sagging greenery, and you have an environment that presses down on the spirit rather than lifting it up. So, what's the Feng Shui remedy? First, remove or relocate uncontrolled vines from transitional zones. No exceptions. If your vines are creeping near your entryway, trim them or rehome them outside. If they're above your bed or wrapping around your desk lamp, consider replacing them with upright plants like the Erica palm or snake plant. These are plants that grow with clarity, not confusion. They do not cling, they rise, they don't pull, they support. In the 5-element system, upright plants bring balanced wood energy, growth, ambition, decision-making, while trailing vines behave like damp earth energy, heavy, slow, stuck. Second, consider the containers. Vine plants in black plastic pots, broken ceramics, or overly decorated planters add to the confusion. Energy needs structure. Choose simple earthen containers with defined shape and neutral tones. Let the plant grow within limits, preferably vertically on a minimalist frame, not sideways into everything it can touch. This teaches the energy of the plant to be supportive rather than invasive. Finally, reflect on your emotional state around these plants. Do you love them because they truly bring joy? Or because they remind you of something nostalgic? Are they thriving or just hanging on? The health of a vine says a lot about the home it occupies. A healthy vine in the right place may soften a balcony or inspire creativity. But a struggling vine indoors, reaching desperately for light, mirrors a home where the energy is also reaching for clarity, for space, for freedom. In the next section, we'll look at a plant that many believe to be trendy and low maintenance, but often invites sharp energy and emotional irritation: the cactus. Though powerful in the desert, it might not belong on your kitchen shelf. Problematic plant number 3, shrub verbena. There's a kind of visual excitement that shrub verbena brings into a space. With its vibrant explosions of color, clusters of pinks, reds, oranges, violets, and sometimes even yellows bursting from a single plant, it easily captures attention in a garden center or nursery. To the untrained eye, it appears lively, joyful, and full of personality. But in the careful lens of Feng Shui, this is a textbook example of misplaced energy. The colors clash, the fragrance overwhelms, and the overall vibration of the plant leans far more toward chaos than calm. While it may thrive outdoors in large, open landscapes where energy can be dispersed and harmonized by other elements, the moment verbena enters a smaller, confined, or energetically sensitive space, such as a bedroom, meditation corner, or entryway, it begins to erode the balance of qi. Let's begin with the color issue. In Feng Shui, color isn't just aesthetic, it's language. Every hue carries an energetic frequency and elemental alignment. Red connects to fire and passion, orange to social expression and appetite, pink to emotional sensitivity, violet to spiritual introspection. On their own and placed with intention, each of these can be powerful allies in shaping emotional tone. But when combined with no hierarchy or harmony, as they often are in a single verbena cluster, the result is overstimulation. The eyes don't rest, the brain can't settle, and the nervous system, especially in children, elders, or anyone energetically sensitive, becomes agitated. This isn't simply about color preference, it's about resonance. Shrub verbena's visual presentation is noisy, and in a space where you're trying to cultivate peace, focus, or intimate conversation, That noise becomes an energetic obstruction. The principle here is similar to how a home filled with mismatched furniture, clashing patterns, or scattered layout creates a subtle anxiety. It's not always conscious, but it accumulates. You feel it when you can't finish your thoughts, when your sleep becomes lighter, when you start to avoid spending time in that one room that used to bring you joy. That's the work of what we call visual noise. And shrub verbena, with its erratic bursts of clashing hues, is a potent generator of it. And then there's the scent. While many associate floral fragrances with relaxation, not all floral scents are created equal. Shrub verbena has a pungent, sometimes musky aroma that intensifies in heat and humidity. In small or poorly ventilated spaces, this scent can become oppressive. According to Feng Shui and broader energy medicine principles, scent is one of the fastest ways to alter mood and one of the hardest to escape once it settles. A harmonious scent, like lavender or cedar, diffuses gently, fills the space without overwhelming it, and then recedes. Verbena's fragrance tends to cling. It over-occupies the room, inserting itself into the respiratory system and triggering agitation rather than serenity. Physically, this may present as headaches, nasal irritation, or light sleep. Energetically, it's more complex. The plant's fragrance becomes what we call energetic chatter, a constant, low-grade distraction that pulls your focus away from grounded tasks and emotional centering. For people already sensitive to their environment, those working from home, recovering from stress, or trying to conceive a child, this scent can quietly undo their efforts to create a nurturing sanctuary. Beyond the senses, the symbolism of shrub verbena also raises concerns. In Feng Shui, plants represent more than their outward traits. They reflect the values and rhythms of the household. A verbena's wild mix of colors, irregular blooming patterns, and chaotic branching suggest an emotional inconsistency. The plant grows in unpredictable spurts. It's messy to trim. It doesn't follow a clean vertical or horizontal line. There's no structure to how it expresses itself. And over time, that lack of internal order subtly imprints on the space it inhabits. Residents may find themselves feeling inconsistent, scattered, unable to commit to goals or routines. Conversations feel more reactive than constructive. Motivation comes in waves and crashes just as fast. This isn't just coincidence, it's resonance. The erratic life force of the plant finds matching frequency in the human system. One of the most common signs that a plant is misaligned with its placement is behavioral change. For example, a client once shared that her teenage son, who used to enjoy reading and quiet music in his bedroom, had grown restless, irritable, and unfocused in the evenings. Upon visiting her home, I noticed a large verbena arrangement on his windowsill, intended to brighten the room. But in doing so, it had also unintentionally scrambled the energy field. We replaced it with a simple pot of lavender and a rose quartz cluster, and within a week, she reported her son's focus and sleep had improved. Now, it's important to clarify that shrub verbena is not inherently bad. In outdoor landscapes, especially those in sun-drenched climates, its fiery nature can be balanced by surrounding wood and earth elements, trees, soil, rocks, and wide open sky. But inside the home, where energy needs to be layered, directed, and tempered, this plant is simply too dominant. It behaves like an extrovert at a silent retreat, demanding attention, interrupting the quiet, and not knowing when to sit still. So what's the alternative? For those who love vibrant color and want to keep floral energy indoors, two options stand out: lavender and basil. Lavender's purple tone connects to intuition and peace. Its scent is proven to reduce anxiety and support restful sleep. Its vertical, structured growth adds quiet dignity to any room. Basil, while technically an herb, offers both olfactory and energetic cleansing. Its rounded leaves and upward growth symbolize prosperity, clarity, and emotional uplift. And both are easier to grow indoors than verbena, with more controllable scent profiles and softer visual tones. The key is always intentionality. Your plants are not just decorative. They are emissaries of vibration. Each one holds a conversation with your environment. Shrub verbena speaks loudly, and not always kindly. It may be beautiful, but beauty without balance is noise. Feng Shui teaches us that when form contradicts function, When visual appeal overrides energetic need, we create dissonance. And in a world already filled with noise, the last place that needs more of it is your home. When overgrowth symbolized a personal crisis, there's a moment in every person's life, regardless of wealth or fame, when the environment begins speaking louder than the mind, when the space around us stops being a neutral background and instead becomes a mirror of inner confusion. In Feng Shui, this is not coincidence. It's alignment. Spaces and psyches reflect one another in an ongoing dialogue of form, energy, and symbolism. And when the landscape gets tangled, chances are, so does the focus. This was illustrated subtly but profoundly in a BBC interview with renowned chef and global entrepreneur Gordon Ramsay. Known for his exacting standards and high-octane presence, Ramsay once spoke briefly and rather unexpectedly about his early kitchen garden, a space meant to nourish his creativity and ground him between intense filming and restaurant operations. But what he described was not a sanctuary, it was chaos. He recalled the garden being overrun with trailing vines and wildflowers, a romantic vision gone rogue. Instead of calm, it brought distraction. Instead of clarity, it delivered visual noise. The vines wrapped around fencing and furniture. Blossoms fell where herbs were meant to grow. It was, in his own words, beautiful but overwhelming. This is a textbook Feng Shui scenario. The climbing vines, visually sprawling without anchor or edge, represent a lack of containment, both in the space and in the internal narrative. In classical spatial metaphysics, such uncontrolled growth creates what we call qi entrapment. Instead of energy moving through a space with clarity and uplift, it begins to coil, scatter, and eventually stagnate. Much like an open-ended thought that never becomes an action or a to-do list that never gets prioritized, the energy becomes indecisive, unsure of its next step. And in a garden, this shows up as overgrowth. In a mind, it shows up as hesitation. Ramsay's realization didn't come through an esoteric practice or a ceremonial ritual. It came through practical intuition. He tore out the vines, he removed the wildflowers, not because they were ugly or useless, but because they no longer served the clarity of intention he needed. In their place, he planted a structured herb garden. Rows of rosemary, lines of basil, defined corners for mint and thyme. Function returned to form, and with it, a subtle internal shift. He described how the moment he stepped back into that new space, something clicked. A return to creative rhythm, sharper decision-making, a deeper sense of calm. From a Feng Shui lens, what he did was not just gardening, it was energetic architecture. By removing entangled forms and replacing them with upright, purposeful life, he restored the metal and wood element. Harmony, structure, metal, supporting growth, wood. He redirected the qi not only of his physical surroundings, but of his inner momentum. Now, most of us don't live on sprawling estates or film shows in Michelin-starred kitchens, but we all have our version of a garden gone wild, a space where what once symbolized possibility has grown tangled with distraction. It could be the home office with too many knickknacks, the meditation space filled with books you haven't touched in months, the living room plant that now coils across the window, blocking light rather than filtering it. The takeaway isn't to make your home sterile or soulless, it's to listen. Because often the very thing we need to change in our mindset has already shown up in our space. In Ramsay's case, the lesson wasn't just about plants, it was about presence, about reclaiming intention over aesthetic noise, about reminding ourselves that beauty is not always beneficial if it doesn't match our energetic needs. When overgrowth becomes the default, clarity becomes the casualty. But when form follows function and energy follows intention, what grows is not just cleaner air or prettier walls, but a clearer, calmer you. And that is always worth cultivating. What to do if you already have these plants? Just because a plant isn't ideal energetically doesn't mean you need to toss it out in haste. In Feng Shui, intention often outweighs impulsive correction. If one of the previously mentioned plants, whether it's golden trumpet, a vine, or a chaotic shrub, already lives in your home, the solution is rarely destruction. It's realignment. The first approach is relocation. Whenever possible, shift these plants outdoors, to a garden, balcony, or shared courtyard. By placing them in an open-air environment, you allow their energy to disperse naturally. Unlike the constrained, chi-sensitive interiors of your home, outdoor spaces can handle more dynamic or chaotic energy. In fact, some of these plants that may feel disruptive indoors may serve protective or energetic buffering roles when stationed near gates, fences, or transitional zones outside the home. Think of it not as rejection, but as giving the plant a more appropriate role, like moving a loud instrument from a meditation room to a music studio. But not every plant can be rehomed. Perhaps one was a gift, carries a memory, or simply brings visual joy despite its energetic drawbacks. In such cases, containment becomes the next best strategy. Begin by pruning the plant regularly, not just to manage physical shape, but to tame symbolic overgrowth. In Feng Shui, pruning isn't cosmetic. It's an energetic recalibration. You're signaling to the plant and the space that excess is being reined in. This restores boundaries, both spatial and energetic. Next, enhance airflow. Position the plant near an open window or air vent. This subtle movement of air prevents chi stagnation, especially with trailing vines or heavy blossoms that tend to cluster around themselves. Air is movement. Movement is life. When your plant breathes well, so does your room. Pairing the plant with grounding elements is another layer of energetic compensation. If a vine or overstimulating shrub must stay in your workspace or bedroom, place a few pieces of hematite, black tourmaline, or smoky quartz around its pot. These stones act like filters, absorbing excessive fire, diffusing emotional volatility, and keeping the room's energy within a centered bandwidth. In traditional practice, stones were not decorative. They were functional chi regulators, planted like energetic anchors. Above all, become an observer of space feedback. Your environment is always speaking. If, after keeping a certain plant, you notice subtle shifts, difficulty sleeping, a pattern of misplaced objects, chronic restlessness in a certain room, don't ignore it. Feng Shui isn't about superstition. It's about pattern literacy. When your environment shifts your behavior or your body's rhythm, it's offering you data. Whether it's a creeping vine in your living room or a vibrant but volatile flower near your bed, the response isn't always fear, it's refinement. To truly master spatial energy is to approach your home like a garden of intention. You don't pull out every weed with force. You study its growth, understand its root, and decide whether to nourish, prune, or relocate. Plants, like people, respond to context. And sometimes the most powerful shift doesn't require buying anything new, but simply moving what you already have into the place it was meant to thrive. When you do that, harmony doesn't have to be forced. It returns quietly like air after a storm, steady, soft, but unmistakably clear. Closing reflection. Your home hears what you grow. A home doesn't just respond to sound, it responds to what we nurture, what we tolerate, and what we allow to root quietly in its corners. Every plant you keep is a subtle declaration of your inner landscape. Is it wild and chaotic, or balanced and intentional? In Feng Shui, plants are not background. They are energetic amplifiers, mirrors of your emotions, metaphors for your momentum. A trailing vine that suffocates a window may be telling you something about a relationship that feels entangled. A bright but overstimulating flower might echo that feeling of constantly being on, even in rest. This isn't about eliminating beauty. It's about choosing the kind of beauty that feeds your future, not just fills your shelf. As you walk through your space tonight, look at what you've grown and ask not just whether it looks good, but whether it feels aligned. You deserve a home that uplifts without overwhelming, that supports your clarity, not just your aesthetics. Thank you for spending this time with me and New Today Mindfulness. If this video gave you a new lens to see your space and the greenery within it, I warmly invite you to like, share, and subscribe. Let's grow this community to 2,000 strong. One breath, one branch, one wise decision at a time. And in the comments, tell me, is there one plant you're reconsidering today? Your story may quietly plant the seed of clarity for someone else.